Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a closer look at something you've been wanting to explore further, the dark night of the soul.
Okay.
You've given us a really interesting mix of material to work with, excerpts from St. John of the Cross's writings
Right.
and selections from the Law of One.
Yeah.
At first glance, they might seem like totally different approaches, but
Yeah, they do.
that's what we're here for.
Exactly.
We'll see what kind of insights emerge when we bring these two perspectives together.
Yeah. What's fascinating to me is that both of these sources, in their own ways, point toward a deeper understanding of spiritual transformation.
Oh, for sure.
One comes from a mystical Christian tradition, the other from a channeled metaphysical source.
Yeah.
But both grapple with this universal human experience of darkness and doubt on the spiritual path.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics. For those unfamiliar with the term, what exactly is the dark night of the soul?
Okay, well, the term comes from the writings of the 16th century Spanish mystic, St. John of the Cross. He describes it as a period of intense spiritual dryness, a feeling of separation from God, and an overwhelming sense of doubt and even despair.
Hmm.
Importantly, it's not a literal night, but a metaphor for a kind of spiritual crisis.
Okay, so we're talking about a feeling of being lost on the spiritual path, like wandering in the wilderness with no sense of direction.
Yes, exactly. And St. John of the Cross goes even deeper, distinguishing between two stages of this night.
Okay.
The first is the dark night of the senses, which he says is relatively common. This stage involves a purification of the senses and a detachment from worldly pleasures.
Okay.
The second stage, the dark night of the spirit, is far more intense, a profound emptying and stripping away of everything we thought we knew about ourselves and God. St. John of the Cross believed this stage was experienced by very few.
Wow. It sounds like traversing some pretty treacherous terrain.
It can be, yeah.
So we've got this classic Christian mystic describing this intense spiritual process. And then we have the Law of One, a channeled text that emerged in the 1980s, offering its own unique perspective. How did these two seemingly disparate sources connect?
That's where it's really interesting. The Law of One introduces this concept of catalyst.
Okay.
Essentially, it's the idea that every experience we have, no matter how challenging or painful, is designed to accelerate our spiritual evolution.
So even those moments that feel like a dark night, like we're completely lost and abandoned, can actually be opportunities for profound growth.
Precisely. The Law of One emphasizes that free will is paramount. We chose to incarnate into this physical reality to learn and evolve, and every experience we encounter, even the ones that make us question everything, serves a purpose in our soul's journey.
So how does the Law of One explain what's actually happening during the dark night of the soul? Like, what's the underlying mechanism that's driving this intense process of transformation?
Well, the Law of One describes how we, as spiritual beings, are on a journey of evolution through different levels of consciousness, which it calls densities. We currently exist in third density, a realm characterized by self-awareness and the exploration of duality, good and bad, light and dark. As we evolve, we move towards fourth density, a realm of love and understanding.
All right.
This transition can be quite turbulent as we shed old patterns of thinking and behaving that no longer serve us.
So the dark night could be seen as a kind of cosmic growing pain, a necessary shedding of the old self to make way for a new, more evolved way of being.
That's a great way to put it. And what's interesting is that the Law of One suggests that before this third density experience, before we entered this realm of duality and forgot our true nature as spiritual beings, we had more conscious control over certain bodily and mental functions that we now consider involuntary.
You mean things like our heartbeat or our digestion? We used to have conscious control over those.
According to the Law of One, yes. It describes a veiling process that occurred as we entered third density. This veil essentially clouded our conscious awareness, leading to the illusion of separation from our true selves and from the divine.
Okay, that's pretty mind-blowing. So how does this veiling process connect to the dark night of the soul?
Well, one way to think about it is that the dark night may be a kind of cosmic wake-up call, a jarring reminder of that forgotten connection. It's like the soul, deep down, knows that something's not quite right. We feel this sense of emptiness and longing, this profound yearning for something more, but we can't quite put our finger on what it is.
It's like we've forgotten the way home. And the dark night is this intense urge, this deep soul-level pull to remember who we truly are.
Exactly. And this is where St. John of the Cross's insights about the two stages of the dark night, the night of the senses and the night of the spirit, can be helpful in understanding what's happening.
Okay, so let's dive deeper into those two stages. What exactly does St. John of the Cross say is happening during the night of the senses?
He describes it as a process of purification, a stripping away of attachments to worldly pleasures, and a detachment from those things that we normally rely on for comfort and security. He
Okay.
gives specific examples, like the loss of what he calls sensible devotion. This refers to a kind of emotional attachment to religious rituals and practices, a reliance on external forms of worship rather than a genuine inner connection with the divine.
So it's like going through the motions of spiritual practice without really feeling it in your heart.
Mm.
Like you might be meditating or praying, but your mind is elsewhere, and you don't experience that sense of peace or connection that you used to.
That's a great way to put it. And St. John of the Cross also talks about experiencing setbacks and reversals of fortune during this stage.
Oh, okay.
It's like everything you thought you could rely on is suddenly pulled away, forcing you to confront your deepest fears and insecurities.
So it's not just about giving up material possessions or bad habits. It's about letting go of the ego's need for control and security, even in the realm of spirituality.
Precisely. And what's interesting is that the Law of One offers a complementary perspective on this process of purification, using the language of energy and vibration. It describes how each density, each level of spiritual evolution, has a specific color vibration and a corresponding metaphysical characteristic.
Okay, so we're not just talking about psychological or emotional shifts, but actual changes in our energetic frequency.
Yes, and the Law of One suggests that as we move through the dark night of the senses, our energy vibration is gradually shifting, moving away from a denser, more material-focused frequency to a lighter, more spiritually attuned one.
So the loss of attachment and the purification of the senses that St. John of the Cross describes could be seen as a reflection of this underlying energetic transformation.
Exactly. It's like we're shedding old, dense energy patterns that no longer serve us, creating space for a new, more refined way of being.
This is so fascinating. Okay, so we've explored the night of the senses. Now let's talk about the even more intense stage, the night of the spirit.
Okay.
What does St. John of the Cross have to say about this?
He uses the powerful image of a secret ladder to describe the soul's ascent towards union with God. This state is characterized by a profound darkness and spiritual emptiness, a feeling of complete abandonment and isolation.
It sounds almost terrifying, like being lost in a vast, empty void with no sense of direction or hope.
It can be incredibly challenging, there's no doubt about that. But St. John of the Cross emphasizes the importance of faith and hope as guiding forces during this difficult passage.
Okay.
He believed that this intense purgation, this stripping away of everything we thought we knew about ourselves and God, ultimately prepares the soul for a profound union with the divine.
And what insights does the Law of One offer about this stage?
The Law of One teaches that our higher self, that wise and loving aspect of ourselves that exists beyond the veil of third density, is always guiding and supporting us, even when we feel most alone. It describes how our higher self helps to heal unresolved experiences from this and past lives, even programming future experiences that will support our continued growth and evolution.
So even in the midst of this spiritual darkness, this feeling of complete abandonment, there's a part of us that's holding the light, guiding us toward wholeness.
Exactly. And this is where the concept of surrender becomes so important.
Okay.
It's about trusting that even though we can't see the path ahead, there's a higher intelligence, a divine orchestration that's guiding us toward our highest good.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these two sources, while coming from very different perspectives, offer a complementary understanding of this intense spiritual process.
Yeah.
But if the dark night of the soul is so difficult, why do we even go through it? What's the point?
That's a great question, and it's one that both St. John of the Cross and the Law of One address.
Okay.
They both emphasize that while incredibly challenging, the dark night ultimately leads to profound transformation. It's a process of purification that prepares the soul for deeper experiences of love and union.
So the dark night isn't about punishment or suffering for its own sake. It's more like a crucible, a refining fire that burns away the impurities that prevent us from experiencing our true nature as love and light.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore what those impurities might be and how we can navigate the challenges of the dark night with greater grace and understanding. So we've talked about this idea of the dark night as a process of purification, a stripping away of those things that keep us from experiencing our true nature.
Yeah. It's almost like we're peeling back layers of an onion, getting closer and closer to the core of who we really are.
Right.
But the peeling process can sting a bit, right?
That's a good analogy, and it highlights the fact that this process of purification, while ultimately liberating, can be quite painful.
Absolutely. So what are some of those layers that get peeled back during the dark night? What are those impurities that St. John of the Cross talks about?
Hmm. He mentions a few specific things, like the attachment to sensible devotion, that reliance on external forms of worship that we talked about earlier.
Right. So it's not just about giving up material possessions.
Right.
It's about letting go of those things we cling to for a sense of spiritual security, even if they're not actually connecting us to the divine.
Exactly. And he also talks about the experience of reverses of fortune, those moments when everything seems to be going wrong and our sense of stability is completely shaken.
Oh, yeah. It's like the universe is giving us a cosmic shakeup, forcing us to confront our deepest fears and insecurities.
That's one way to look at it, and the Law of One offers another perspective here.
Okay.
It describes how these challenging experiences can be seen as catalysts for growth, pushing us to evolve beyond our current level of understanding.
Okay, so how does this idea of catalyst actually work in practice? Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine someone who's deeply attached to their career, identifying their worth with their professional achievements. Let's say they suddenly lose their job.
Oh, wow.
This experience, while incredibly painful, could act as a catalyst, forcing them to reevaluate their priorities and discover a deeper sense of purpose beyond their professional identity.
So it's like the rug is pulled out from under them, and in that moment of free fall, they have an opportunity to let go of old limiting beliefs and create something new.
Yes. And this process can be applied to any area of life, relationships, finances, even our beliefs about spirituality.
Okay.
The Law of One suggests that anything that creates a dissonance, a disruption in our perceived reality, can act as a catalyst for growth.
So the Dark Knight isn't necessarily about specific events or experiences.
Right.
It's more about the underlying process of being shaken out of our comfort zone, forced to confront those aspects of ourselves that we've been avoiding.
That's a powerful way to put it. And it highlights the fact that the Dark Knight can manifest in many different ways for different people.
Okay, so let's say someone is going through this process, experiencing this intense feeling of darkness and disorientation. What are some practical things they can do to navigate the challenges of the Dark Knight?
Well, both St. John of the Cross and the Law of One emphasize the importance of patience and surrender.
Yeah, that's easier said than done when you're in the midst of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know.
How do you actually surrender to something that feels so painful and overwhelming?
It starts with recognizing that you're not in control of the process.
Uh,
That doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up.
mm,
It's more about acknowledging that there are forces at play that are bigger than you
mm.
and trusting that even though you can't see the path ahead, you're being guided towards your highest good.
It's like learning to trust the current, even when you can't see where it's taking you.
Exactly. And this could be a really difficult concept to grasp, especially in our culture that values control and
Oh,
self-reliance.
yeah. We're conditioned to believe that we need to fix everything, to figure it all out ourselves.
And that's where the Dark Knight can be a real challenge to our ego's need for certainty and control.
Yeah.
It's about learning to let go, to trust the process, even when it feels like we're falling apart,
So it's not about doing something to get out of the Dark Night.
right?
It's more about shifting our inner stance, cultivating a sense of trust and surrender. Precisely. And this can be supported by certain practices like meditation, prayer, or spending time in nature. These practices can help us connect with that deeper part of ourselves that's beyond the ego's fears and anxieties.
So it's about creating space for stillness and reflection, allowing ourselves to simply be with the experience without trying to change it or fix it.
Exactly. And the Law of One offers some additional insights here.
Okay.
It suggests that creating what it calls a resonating chamber can be helpful in supporting the healing process.
Okay, what exactly is a resonating chamber and how do you create one?
It's not necessarily about building a physical structure, although that might be one approach. It's more about creating an environment, both internal and external, that resonates with a high vibration of love and healing.
So it could be about decluttering your physical space, spending time in nature, or even just being mindful of the thoughts and emotions you're allowing into your awareness.
Yes, all of those things can contribute to creating a resonating chamber. It's about aligning yourself with frequencies that support healing and transformation.
Hmm. The Law of One also mentions avoiding certain materials, like lead, which are considered to have a dense vibration. Is that part of creating a resonating chamber?
Yes, being mindful of the materials you surround yourself with can also play a role. Some materials are thought to enhance or inhibit the flow of energy.
So it's not just about what we're thinking and feeling, but also about the energetic qualities of our environment.
Exactly. And this idea connects back to St. John of the Cross's emphasis on purification.
Hmm.
It's about clearing away anything that's cluttering our inner and outer space, creating a more refined and receptive vessel for the divine.
This is all starting to make a lot of sense. But there's one thing I'm still wondering about. The Law of One mentions Orion Crusaders, these negative entities that might try to disrupt spiritual progress. How does that fit into the whole picture of the Dark Knight?
That's an important point. The Law of One suggests that as we evolve spiritually, we become more sensitive to subtle energies, both positive and negative.
Yeah.
And during the dark night, when our defenses are down, we might be more susceptible to interference from negative entities.
So it's not just about dealing with our own inner demons, but also about navigating a more complex energetic landscape.
Yes, and this is where discernment becomes crucial. It's about learning to distinguish between our own intuition and guidance and those thoughts and impulses that might be coming from an outside source.
So how do you tell the difference? How do you know if it's your own inner critic whispering doubts or something more sinister at play?
That's where practices like meditation and mindfulness can be really helpful. They can help us develop a stronger connection to our intuition, that inner voice of wisdom that's always guiding us towards truth and love.
And St. John of the Cross also talks about the importance of seeking guidance from a trusted spiritual mentor.
That's right. Having a wise and compassionate guide can be incredibly valuable during this process. They can help us navigate the challenges of the dark night, offering support and perspective when we need it most.
So it's not about going it alone. It's about recognizing that we're part of a larger web of support, both human and divine.
Exactly. And as we cultivate trust in that support, we can begin to see the dark night not as a punishment, but as an invitation to deeper healing and transformation.
Okay, we've talked about the challenges of the Dark Knight and some practical ways to navigate those challenges,
Yeah.
but ultimately, how do you not just survive it, but actually thrive through it? What's the secret to embracing the transformative potential of this experience?
That's where it gets really exciting. And it's where both St. John of the Cross and the Law of One converge on a powerful message: love.
Wait, love. How can love possibly be the answer in the midst of such darkness and despair?
It might sound paradoxical, but it's often in the depths of our struggles that we discover the most profound wellspring of love within ourselves. St. John of the Cross describes how the dark night ultimately purifies and prepares the soul for union with the divine, which he equates with an all-encompassing love.
Hmm.
This process of purification, while painful, essentially burns away the impurities that prevent us from fully experiencing this love.
So it's like the darkness is revealing the love that was always there, just hidden beneath layers of conditioning and attachment.
Beautifully put. The Law of One echoes this sentiment, emphasizing that love is the very foundation of our being. It's the force that connects us to the infinite creator and to each other.
So how do you actually access this love when you feel anything but loving, when you're consumed by doubt, fear, and isolation?
That's where the practices of self-compassion and surrender become crucial. Remember, the dark night is often a time when our inner critic is most active, bombarding us with judgments and accusations.
Yeah, it's like that voice in your head turns into a relentless drill sergeant.
Exactly, and trying to silence that voice through sheer willpower is rarely effective.
So what can you do? So if trying to silence the inner critic doesn't work, what can we do instead? It feels like it just gets louder when you're going through a dark night of the soul.
You're right, it can really feel that way. Instead of silencing it, what if we shifted to a stance of gentle curiosity and compassion?
Hmm. Instead of beating ourselves up for feeling lost and afraid, we approach those feelings with understanding and kindness. Is that what you mean?
Yes, exactly. It's like recognizing that you're going through something incredibly difficult and offering yourself the same tenderness and care you'd give to a loved one in need.
It's like saying to yourself, hey, I know you're hurting right now, and that's okay. Let's just breathe together for a moment.
Beautifully put. And in that space of compassionate presence, you might find that the intensity of your struggle begins to soften just a bit.
Yeah, it's like the love you're offering yourself creates a little pocket of warmth in the darkness.
Exactly. And as you continue to cultivate this inner sanctuary of love, you'll find that it becomes a source of strength and resilience, helping you navigate even the most challenging aspects of the dark night.
It sounds like it's not about bypassing the darkness or pretending it's not there. It's about learning to meet it with an open heart.
You've got it. It's about recognizing that the darkness itself isn't the enemy. It's often a catalyst for profound growth and healing, revealing hidden strengths, and leading us towards a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe.
The thing that I find so powerful about both St. John of the Cross and the Law of One is the emphasis on love as the guiding force. It gives me a sense of hope even when things feel really dark.
Absolutely. Remember, St. John of the Cross talks about how the dark night ultimately prepares the soul for a profound union with the divine. And the Law of One reminds us that love is the very foundation of our being, the force that connects us to each other and to the infinite creator.
So even in the midst of those feelings of isolation and abandonment, there's a deeper truth that we can tap into, a truth of interconnectedness and unwavering love.
That's the key. And as you emerge from the dark night, having faced your fears and embraced your vulnerabilities, you'll find that this truth has woven itself into the very fabric of your being, transforming you in ways you couldn't have imagined.
It sounds like the Dark Night isn't the end of the story. It's a doorway to a new chapter one, filled with greater wisdom, compassion, and a profound sense of purpose.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's a journey of descent and return, a process of shedding old skins and emerging into a more authentic and radiant expression of your true self.
Wow. This has been such a rich and insightful conversation. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this complex and multifaceted topic.
I agree, and that's the beauty of it. The dark night of the soul is a lifelong journey of discovery, one that invites us to continuously deepen our understanding of ourselves, our connection to the divine, and the transformative power of love.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. And a final thought to leave you with. Could the veiling process described in the Law of One, the idea that we chose to forget our true nature as spiritual beings, be a contributing factor to the prevalence of the dark night of the soul in our modern age? Perhaps this forgetting makes us more susceptible to the doubts and anxieties that characterize this stage of spiritual development. What do you think? Until next time, keep diving deep and keep trusting the journey, even when the path seems shrouded in darkness.